This video is brought to you by BTI Institute, a New Jersey leader in certification-based management training.
Welcome everyone to tonight's Agile discussion group, and we have a very special speaker, Mark Shedd. I've had encounters with Mark ever since I've been working at the Federal Reserve Bank in New York, where he comes in and gives presentations on a weekly basis, and they're always very engaging and very interesting. So when I reached out to Mark, I said, "Hey, Mark, would you mind, sharing some of your great stuff with the ADG group from PMI New Jersey?" Mark very nicely said yes, and so his bio is inside the advertisement, and I'll now pass it over to Mark. And welcome, Mark. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys very much for having me. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll see how this is going to work. I don't use Zoom as much, and so I have working through some interesting audio things here. I am set up where I can see the chat. So let me throw something in here real fast. This should get you to, we're going to do a Slido as we go through things. And so if you can bring that up and just keep it open in window next to you. And we're going to be talking today about predicting the future, agile forecasting. So first question for you, Slido question for you. Is that working for everybody? You able to get that? So how important are your estimates? You can also, if it's easier to do on your phone to keep your screen set up, you can hit that QR code if that works better for some reason. Okay, important. Okay, see results coming in, so that's great. No one's willing to say that they're unimportant. And go ahead and do get the Slido. We are going to keep it fun and engaging. We're going to ask questions as we go, and then this isn't one of the ones, but some of the questions actually have a right answer based on something we said, based on what we may have talked about, and we'll give something away. I think we'll give away a copy of my book, Starting Agile, which had I been better prepared, I would have in my hand, but I moved those. So anyway, we'll give away a copy of a book. Like I'll send you a book, and we'll give a link for everybody to get one here as well. Okay, so it looks like, but do get that Slido link up because it's a lot more fun if we can be engaged. So let's like 75% of us say it's important, 13% are like it's very important, 6% say it's very unimportant. So we've got kind of a range here, but most of us are falling into the camp of saying it's pretty, our estimates are pretty important. But here's the next question for you. How often are your original estimates correct? So this is interesting. It looks like most of us are saying about half the time or more in that range. They're correct. I'm going to let this run for just a minute. I just had something kick on. I want to shut off so I can hear everything better. We live in Kansas, and as it starts getting humid, my humidifier kicks on, so I want to shut that off so it's not quite as loud. Okay, so what I find interesting is a lot of us said it's very important, but most of us are saying about 50% of the time we get them wrong, or even more than that. And so I find this fascinating that we've got something to say is very important, but we're also saying a lot of times it's wrong. So I want to suggest that maybe estimates, not that they're not important, but maybe they're for something else. Maybe we're using estimates to drive something that may not be, maybe it's not as important telling us when something's going to be done as some other things we're going to look at. But anyway, we'll look at all these things. Here's, when it comes to estimates, this is what comes to my mind. It's the KCD cartoon, and it's the author of the Windows file copy dialog, visit some friends. And this may be fixed on newer versions of Windows, but did you ever look at Windows where it's like, this is going to take you 4 minutes? No, look, it's 40 hours. No, it's 360 days. And it just jumps around. So he's on his way to visit friends. He says, I'm just outside town, so I should be there in 15 minutes. Actually, it's looking more like 6 days. No, wait, it's 30 seconds. So he's making estimates really, really fast, and it's doing nothing to tell the person when he's going to actually arrive. So Imagine Henry Ford, right? Early on, we're saying, Mr. Ford, I've got a great idea. This is a text message with Henry Ford. You may not have realized it, but there was early something Edison was working on, and then it got squashed by the government for years. So there was text messaging back in Henry Ford. I'm just making this up. But anyway, imagine the text message with Henry Ford. And if one of the people working for him says, Mr. Ford, I've got a great idea for a Model T. He said, well, let's hear it. I think people would like to know how fast they're going. He's like, that does sound like a great idea. And he says, every week we'll send them a report of their average speed. Okay, so they're going to get information about how fast they're going. And the point I want to make with this is that the value of knowing where you are, if you get the value is knowing where you are right then, not something that's way in the future where you're going to be or where you were a long time back. So I'm going to make a few possibly controversial statements here. I'm going to say that there is more value in creating conversations around priority than having a correct estimate. And what I'm saying about that is knowing what the next most important thing we could possibly be working on is probably more important than having a correct estimate. It's not saying we don't, excuse me, I'm not saying we don't want to estimate or that there's no value in estimating, but the real value is knowing what we should work on next. And a correct estimate that doesn't create conversations will end up being wasteful or wrong. So even if you get an estimate and you happen to hit that estimate, I'm suggesting that if there's not conversations that are happening around it, even if it happens to be true, it probably was going to be wasteful or wrong in some other way, as far as representing the amount of work it takes, even if you happen to hit that particular date. Okay, so here's the quiz I told you about. Take a look. Let me, if somebody can copy and paste that link back down, just in case anybody didn't join, and go to that link. And we're going to ask some questions as we go, and we'll have a leaderboard, and we'll cheer for the winners. So go ahead and join that. So you're competing for a copy of Starting Agile. I will send you a hardback in the mail. As long as you're in the United States. And we'll have questions as we go throughout it. So go ahead and join. It's a lot more fun and a lot more engaging if you're actually clicking through with content as well as we go. Okay, so I'll give you just a few more seconds to get on there. Like I said, you can use your phone if it's easier to work from that device. A few more seconds to join. Encourage all of you to join here. And if you can join late as well, that's fine too. Okay, 4, 3, 2, 1. And first question, what does Mark say is the most valuable things that comes from estimates? Is it conversations about priority, knowing exactly when the software will be done, the feeling of having a correct estimate, or having a single date that you know will probably be wrong? Okay, give a few more seconds here for people to make your bet. And time matters, so being fast. My daughter just did one of these for her chemistry class, and she was trying it out on us, and I won the first time she tried it out on us, and then my wife won the second time, so I wasn't quite as fast at clicking. Okay, 2 more seconds, and lock in your answers. And yes, conversations about priority. So what I'm suggesting here is that the most valuable things that comes from estimates is the conversations that come out of the estimates about what the next most important thing is to work on. Okay, let's see our leaderboard. And we got Paula in the top spot, followed by Marvin, Karen P., Chris Kelly, and John Rilling. Very good. Okay, another conversation. So imagine that I'm coming home from work, and I'm like, my wife texts me and says, when do you think you'll be home? Company's coming at 6. And I say, I should be there at 5:50. And she says, oh, good. Then can you go by the store and get eggs, the pet store to get lizard food, and the car dealership to pick up floor mats? I'm like, oh, okay. And she says, okay, see you at 5:50. Does this feel familiar? Have you ever given an estimate and had exactly the same thing happen? And this is what I want to say, that this type of conversation isn't necessary. Often we go, oh, this is bad. We change the scope. But maybe this is really important. And the problem is, if we are just saying that that's the estimate and now we're going to change everything and assume everything's going to stay the same, this isn't. The conversation is what we need to have. How important is it to actually get lizard food? Maybe that doesn't matter. Or maybe the company that's coming is bringing their lizard, it's Komodo dragon, and it's hungry. If we don't feed it, people are going to get hurt. But the point is those conversations are important. So when I give information to my wife about when I'm going to be there, it needs to be a cycle, right? It needs to go all the way around and having a conversation. Otherwise, we end up in a situation something like this. So when do you think you'll get home? Company will be here at 6. Well, I've been burned in the past because I gave an estimate and then was held to it even when everything changed. So I say, I can't really say. There's too many unknowns for me to predict when I'm going to be home. She said, you're literally 10 miles from the house. And I said, I know, but there might be road closures. She said, but when do you plan to be here? And I'm like, and meteors. Meteors could really mess up any timetable I give you. And my point here is this is not useful either, right? The first one was meaningless in terms of when we'll get done, but so is this. I'm not giving any information because I've been burned in the past and I don't want to say anything, but we need to have those conversations need to be what's actually happening. Back and forth all the way around to where we're giving it out, here's how long this looks like it'll take, and then we get information about what's important, and then more information going back. And if that cycle isn't happening as part of a conversation, we're probably not getting the value from estimates, and they're probably hurting us more than they're helping us. So how do we make estimates? And this is kind of an outline of what we're going to be looking at. Well, we could just guess, and honestly, that's what happens a lot of times. We could try to find a way to size the work. Or actually, I'm sorry, we're going to be talking about these things. Got to turn around. Talk about guessing, sizing work, estimating, and then forecasting, which I'm going to suggest is a way to get the value that we're usually looking for from an estimate, but in a way that's actually helpful, that facilitates the conversation. Okay, so how are we going to do this? We're going to look at books, okay? And this isn't completely hypothetical. This is my daughter, who's a senior this year in high school, but this was her reading for one class. Let's see what year that. Okay, so this was 7th grade. These were the books she read for one class in 7th grade. We were in a very intense reading curriculum. So there's some value here in thinking through how long does it take to get through books. So what's the major downside of not knowing how long it will take for Katie to finish her stack of books? Just guess, what do you think is the most major downside? Is it that she might not get them done, that she might get them done too quickly at the expense of other classes? She might not be done in time. She might get frustrated. She might get frustrated and decide she doesn't like reading. And there's not a right answer here, but what I want to point out to you here is if we don't have some way of knowing how long it's going to take, there are bad things that are going to happen. And so as we're talking about estimates, and I'm saying that maybe they don't matter in ways that we think they do, there is something valuable about knowing how long things will take. And we're going to walk through what that would look like for books and then see how it applies to some other things. Okay, so yes, and this is interesting. She might go too quickly and not learn what she needs to learn. That can happen with software too, right? We can have an estimate that's set in time and we're trying to get done so fast that we make a lot of really bad decisions that actually undermine the entire project. I was talking to somebody just yesterday, a software project we've worked on. We built an ERP system for this company in a very interesting genetics part of is the field that they're in. Anyway, they're trying to be able to express the value of their software. And so we were talking through it, and one thing that came up in the conversation is we have a track record of being able to go in and change stuff. Even though the software is old, we're not trying to rewrite it. It's something that there's enough tests and everything around it that we can make changes to it. Had we had some type of estimate pushing us and we shortcut things, we wouldn't be in that situation today. So the value of the software is a lot higher. But point of that is if the estimate's driving you to do things too quickly, that could be actually a lot worse. Okay, knowing how long it will take is valuable, but guessing is counterproductive. So how should we help Katie estimate? Well, maybe we need to better understand the size of the work. If Katie just guesses and she has no idea, that's not necessarily valuable, but there's some way we can understand how much work is she going to have to do to read these. Then we can make more granular guesses. So we're still in the scope of guessing, but we're going to guess that's based on something instead of just random numbers. So here's a stack of books right here. I pulled these off my shelf. So we've got Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan, Pinocchio, The Divine Comedy, Moby Dick, and Robinson Crusoe. So let's just, for the purposes of this, let's imagine that we're trying to read through this stack of books. And if you haven't read any of these books, I highly recommend Alice in Wonderland and Pinocchio. They're great. Okay, so we're going to try to look at these first three books here just to see how long it would take. Oh, actually, I said that wrong. These 3 books, looking at these, once we'd read those 3 books, how much of our reading is done? So what do you think? Do you think it's 19%, 22%, 50%? None of these options. This isn't for the prize. Just what does it feel like in looking at this? And what I want to point out is that there are reasons you could choose any of these numbers. So 6 books, 3 of them, we could say, okay, it's about 50% done. And it looks like a lot of them done. Others are saying this is a trick question, so I'm going to say none of those options. 22%, 19%. All of these could technically be correct. Like if you say 3 of 6 books were 50% of the way through the total. That would make perfect sense in looking at these books. Or we could do it this way, right? We could measure how thick are the books. And that's not a completely insane way of measuring books. So we could say, okay, based on the height of these things, we've read 7 of 22 centimeters. So now we're at 33% of the total. That would be, this is not an illogical way of doing it. And maybe this makes even more sense than the 50%, because the 50% was based on all the books being about the same size, but we kind of chose the smaller ones are the ones we're looking at. So maybe thickness actually makes more sense. On the other hand, if we're measuring thickness of a book, this is, I think, Codex Gigantus, what's it called? Yeah, Codex Gigas, also known as the Devil Bible, which is a really, really thick, very, very big Bible. And then this is the world's smallest Bible. So maybe measuring how thick it is, these both contain similar amounts of text. Maybe that's not the best way to just stack them up and measure them. So what other way? Well, maybe if we divide it into chapters. Well, now we've read 65 of the 331 total chapters. So now we're at 19%. And what I'm trying to show is there's lots of ways we could actually estimate this. Well, maybe we should count the sentences. And I didn't actually do that for this, but let me give you an example. Here is Peter Pan, first line of Peter Pan. All children except one grow up. Okay, so we could count all the sentences up. Here is a single sentence from Robinson Crusoe. And I'm not going to read through it, but these aren't really comparing the same things at all. That's a single sentence, lots of semicolons and all kinds of things going on. If you actually write like that today, you'll probably lose your readers, but it's a great book to read as long as you can keep track of where you are in your sentence. What if we were to count the words? Would it be worth counting each word in each book before we read it? And this brings up some interesting point. How much should we invest in non-reading activities to create a better estimate? And this is something that's very important to think about when we're looking at software, is if we come up with a way to estimate that takes away time from actually delivering the software, at some point that's going to start becoming counterproductive. So how much should we invest in estimating software before it's counterproductive? So my point here is everything has trade-offs. We've got lots of different ways to look at estimating stuff. A lot of them apply to software, and there's not really a clear way from just estimating how long it would take, there's not something that sticks out as saying this is the clear best way to do it. So let's look at some principles for sizing work. Our units used need to be somewhat similar. We don't want to consider that the sentences in Peter Pan, really short sentences, can be compared one-to-one with sentences in Robinson Crusoe. The other principle is sizes must be inexpensive to obtain. If it takes as much work, like counting every word will take somewhere on the same level of effort as it will take to read the entire text. That's probably an indication that that's not how we want to estimate it. Yet sometimes that's what I've seen happen in software. Matter of fact, I've seen some people that they go through and figure out everything they need, put it all in Jira, the changes that they want to make, and then say, okay, now we're going to work on this story. So they spend 90% of their time in the estimating the size, and then a very small amount copying that change in. And most of that's because they've been burdened by estimates in the past. So the Odyssey and the Iliad both contain 24 books. So what some people call a user story, others are going to call an epic. And my point is that we need to be making sure that we're looking at things that are similar in size, even though we may have names that mean very different things. It's not necessarily the same size, just measuring the same thing. Time spent determining the size could be spent doing actual work. Okay, so the question here is, you're ready, set, get your fingers ready. Units used for blank need to be blank. So units used for delivery need to be granular. Units used for comparison need to be similar. Units used for stories need to be story pointed, or units used for sizing need to be discombobulated. I'll give you a hint, that last one, that's it. It's not it. It was just an excuse to use the word discombobulated. So yes, units used for comparison do need to be similar. If they're not similar, we're going to have a hard time sizing our work. And there's our leader, Karen in the top spot, followed by Chris, JT, Pete, and Susan. Very nice. Okay, pages. It would make sense to kind of look at pages because the pages are going to take about the same amount to read. Of all of these books that we looked at, the number of words on a page doesn't vary by like a scale of magnitude, right? They're kind of similar in the number of words, or the number of words that are going to be on a page. It's going to take a similar amount of time to read one page in Alice in Wonderland as in Pinocchio, as in Robinson Crusoe. Not the same necessarily, but kind of similar. So it's easy to estimate. It's somewhat similar in size. So this might be a good indication. So this looks like a really good balance for trade-offs. So how would you size work to create an estimate for this stack of books? Just based on what we've talked about, what seems to make most sense? And there's not a right answer here, but based on what we've looked at. So audio playing time, that makes sense as a way of looking at stuff. Although we've got some audiobooks where they talk really, really slowly, and others where people talk a little bit more, probably like me. Okay, so there's different ways we could do it. There's not a right or wrong answer here, but what I want to point out is that we left out something important. I forgot to ask something. What does it mean to finish reading something? So for Katie, what does it mean for her to finish a book? Is there any type of validation? And in this case, there is. There are chapter tests. These are books she's reading for school. So this actually changes everything. We're now in a very different situation than if we aren't thinking about what does it mean to actually finish. So principles for sizing work, units need to be similar for comparison, need to be similar, sizes need to be inexpensive to obtain, and you need to be able to complete it without having any hidden work. If we deal with our sizing in a way that hides work in it, we're not going to be sizing things in a way that actually helps us be productively have estimates or have an idea of how much work is remaining. So we need to have some way of sizing things in a way that can be completed with no hidden work. Okay, so we need to size work so it can be completed what? Think of software without changing more than 10 lines of code, or with no hidden work, or by one developer, or without talking to the customer. What are we looking for? We need to size work so it can be completed. Which one of these? There we go, time's up. And yes, with no hidden work. I think I used to have some other slides in between there, but took them out because of time. So you had it right after I said it. So yeah, everybody, 100%. Karen, Chris, JT, Susan, and Jay. Very nice. Chapter tests. Chapters are probably the most appropriate unit of work to size in this case because it allows us to follow all three principles that we've discovered in looking at this. So what might be analogous to chapter tests in software projects? So what do you think? What might be, we're talking about book now, how would we apply this to software? Unit tests, okay, we could be the number of unit tests that we're doing. Functions. So the thing that actually indicates that we have completed something. Milestones, modules, unit tests, user stories, releases. And these all make UAT, so it may be we can say something's done once it's gotten through UAT. Going live, that's the one I like. Is the customer delighted with this thing? Have we given it to the customer in the way that the customer is delighted with it? So these all could be valid in different contexts, but what I want us to think about is what does it mean? At what point can we say this is done and we are very confident there's no more hidden work as part of it? It may be going live. Ideally, that would be the best thing. So looking at this, we looked at chapters. We said we're 19% of total. If we think about software, what about software? Well, units for sizing software, we could size based on characters, tokens or words. I've seen some stuff from the 60s where they were actually estimating software based on the number of tokens or the number of words that would need to be typed or lines of code. It could be functions, it could be features, it could be epic. There's different ways that we could actually size stuff. I'm going to skip on through this to make sure we've got time. But if we graph this stuff out here, up and down, we've got the effort to obtain, and down the bottom, we've got granularity. We can see that trying to come up with a 10-year plan for stuff is going to be not very granular at all, but take a whole lot of effort to obtain. On the other side here, we've got characters, which is going to be very granular, but really, really hard to obtain. So if we look at this and kind of draw a line, what's right here, right? What's the thing that's like the lowest amount of effort to obtain and kind of this middle ground for granularity? And I would suggest that that is where the user story fits in, which is why if we're using user stories, something that we're able to deliver, and when I say user story, I mean something that is written from somebody that uses your software from their point of view, and it tells a way that the world is better for them than it was before that thing was implemented. Could be very, very simple, but somehow it's a fictional story about somebody using your system and they're happier because of something that you've done in the system. So a user story is small, it's valuable to the user, it's demonstratable, it's testable, and it's independently deployable. So that's the definition I'm using for user story. Okay, so now let's go and talk about estimates. So back to our chapters. We've got 331 chapters. How long does it take to read an average chapter? So we're switching back thinking of the books. How long would it take to read an average chapter? We're going to say an hour. Well, maybe. How long for each test? 30 minutes. So maybe we say 331 times 1.5. So it's going to take 496.5 hours to finish that stack of books. Now, I want to point out that how much confidence do you have in this number? I would say probably not. I don't have very much confidence in it, right? I just guessed some numbers, multiplied them out, and now I've got this number. But I want to point out that this number is, we don't have the evidence that this number is any better than a guess. So what if I were to ask myself, what happens if I actually fail a test? Well, how difficult is the Divine Comedy, right? How hard is it going to be to read that? Can I read it in English, or do I need to learn Italian before starting? There's a lot of unknowns still as part of this. And what are the repercussions if the estimate is wrong? So maybe I should just triple the estimate just to be safe. Okay, so now I end up with this number. It's 1,489.5 hours. Notice how specific that number is and how horribly inaccurate the numbers we use to come up with that number. So, point to ponder here is, did tripling it actually make things any more accurate? No. It was an inaccurate, tripling an inaccurate number does not make it more accurate. So why should you trust this number? You shouldn't trust it. This is just a way to try to cover ourselves of saying, we think we can be done within this because I'm going to get in trouble if I'm not done by that amount of time. So imagine this conversation with Bob. Can you estimate how much a blue whale weighs? And say it weighs 211,269 pounds. And like, wow, that's awesome. How'd you come up with that very precise number so quickly? It's like, well, I guess 70,423 pounds and then multiplied by 3 to make it more accurate. It's like, your use of mathematics practically guarantees that to be an accurate number. Well, no, that's not the case here at all. Multiplying by 3 makes it nearly impossible to have conversations about the estimate. And we throw estimates out like this sometimes, but the way that we came up with them gives us no good way. We guessed a number, then multiplied by 3. There's no way to have conversations between Bob and whoever's texting here about how that number was arrived at to try to make sure it's accurate and understand the implications of it. So still, have you ever done something like this for software? Well, yes, I've done stuff like this for software. I'm sure every one of us has done something like this with software. And it really feels like this isn't very accurate. So here's an example with software. Can you estimate when the project will be done? 2,193 person hours. Like, man, we really need it to be done in no more than 1,800 person hours. Like, okay, we can do it in 1,800 person hours. Like, well, what did you change? I changed my guess to 600 and multiplied by 3 instead of guessing 731 and multiplied by 3. There's no meaningful conversation that can come out of this type of discussion, and yet this is how we do it so often with software. This is often what drives million-dollar decisions, is a bunch of decisions that were made just like this. So there's no useful dialogue that can happen in this case, and this shouldn't be a guess the number game. So question, what did Mark say was a major problem with the 3x mult method of estimation? What was the major problem that I was calling out? Yes, it makes it nearly impossible to have conversations about the estimate. So it's very difficult to steer the project if we're providing numbers in this type of manner. Okay, we got Karen Stone's top spot, followed by Chris, Pete, Valerie, and Jay. Now, books are well defined, but software is not. So we should expect the problem to be even worse with software. An estimate is just a guess at the point where we have the least evidence available. And if you think of it like this sounds like it's a really bad idea to do estimates. Traditional 3x estimates assume it's better to be inefficient than to not deliver by the guess. And this is what drives a huge amount of waste in software development because for whatever reason, the way that we're structured, a lot of organizations are structured, is that it's better to hit our estimate, to fall within the estimate, even if it means that it was very wasteful in the way that we got there. So wouldn't it be better to guess after we had some evidence? What if we could create a process to refine our guess each week based on actual experience? And what if we could use the feedback of what we accomplish each week to influence the scope? So if we're going along and saying, hey, this is working really, really well, that's great. But if we're going along, man, these things seem to be a lot harder, maybe we change the scope and say, this hard thing turns out to be, it's not worth it. We were going to try to integrate with this other system, but we could live without it. And if it's really, really expensive to do, we could live without it, or we could push it until the end. We could leave it till the end. If we have time, we'll do it, but we could actually go live and meet our objectives, our major objectives, by leaving this piece out. So this brings us to forecasting. What if we used evidence-based numbers? So if we think about forecasting the chapters read, let's say we do something like this, and we say, so each of these represents a week, and there's lots of numbers here, but it's pretty simple. So over there in column A, it's what we're doing each week. So here's the total chapters and then the number of chapters remaining for how much we complete each week. So the first week, we completed 10 chapters. And so the next week, we've got 321 chapters remaining. So over here, this is just our guess based on our evidence of how much we think we can complete each week. So a low guess and a high guess is what we're using here. And we put in 5 and 8 just for fun. Let's just see, we're going to guess we can do between 5 and 8 a week. And then these numbers just basically say, if I do 5 a week, when do I finish? If I do 8 a week, when do I finish? That kind of makes sense, mostly? So then right here, this is just showing us the number of that are remaining, which is used to figure out the earliest and latest forecast. And if you notice, the forecast changes based on how much we actually got done. So this was, like I said, the first 4 weeks, that was just a guess. But once we've done this, that's just a guess. It's like an estimate. We just guessed how much we would do. We have no evidence that this will be remotely accurate. But once we've got 4 weeks, we now can look back and say, okay, these weeks right here, the best we did was 10 and 9. Okay, so we're going to say that the worst we did was 9 chapters and 10 chapters. So we're going to say that we're going to guess that our low average is about 9.5 a week. We're also going to guess that our high average is going to be the average of the first 2 numbers, 12 and 15. So it's 13.5. Now we're in a very different situation because these numbers are actually based on something that we've done before. And if we keep refining this as we go and looking at how have we delivered in the past, these numbers will become increasingly more accurate. And the beauty of this is we now have a range of saying, under the best scenario, based on what we've done so far, here's when we'll finish. Under the worst scenario, based on the worst that we've done so far, here's when we'll finish. Those are numbers you can have real good conversations around. And if we don't like the numbers, let's not just change our guess. Let's go in and actually take some things off the scope. Let's find ways of splitting stuff. Let's find ways to make these numbers give us what we want, not by just changing guesses, but by changing what we're setting out to do. So what are some of the differences between our estimate and our forecast? Well, in this case, we had just a very precise sounding number. Here, we have a very precise sounding number that is just completely a guess. But the other difference is as we're going through these total chapters, you've probably never been in a book where people kept adding chapters to the end of the book as you're going, but that happens with software all the time. We often get into a place where someone adds something to the backlog. Software is usually not as well defined as books. So how do we model this? Well, if we do this, I've added a few columns here, and this is what I usually use with software teams. What we would do is we've added a column that says, here's the number of stories added. Now they've added that the number of stories that have been added, I also now can keep track of how many I completed, but also my net progress. Like if I take how many were completed and subtract the number that are added, how many steps did I take toward completing everything? So the first week here on line 3, we did 10. And so our net progress was 10 because we didn't add any stories. But notice if you go down here to line 9, that week we didn't complete anything and we added a story. So we made negative progress. We actually went backwards. Oh, come on. Video not working. Okay, give me just a second. I'm going to restart a piece of equipment here that's starting to be problematic for me. Not sure what's going on. So while that's coming back up, has anyone ever used something like this for delivering software? There we go. The only thing team members hate more than estimating is time reporting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So somebody has used something like this. Okay. Did it work well for you? Cool. Okay. Okay. So just giving an idea, does this report make sense? Do you think you could explain this report to someone? General idea. Okay, if you sat down with it, you could probably figure out where the thing. We went through it kind of fast. What I like about this report is I've never found somebody on a team or in management that I couldn't explain what this was and why these numbers are the way that they are. And if you're trying to present estimates to people and you don't have a way of explaining, of them really understanding what the numbers mean, they will likely ask you to fudge the numbers because to them it's just magic. You're just guessing, and sometimes that is what's happening. This gives a very good way, and I like using this along with Monte Carlo's forecasting. So you can look and say, look, we're coming up with things that are in the same range. You can choose whichever one you want, but here's a way of looking at it that makes perfect sense. I can understand exactly why this is changing because as I change the scope, the numbers change. Or as people aren't able to get stuff done because they can't get through the change management process or whatever it is. So imagine that you're driving and you say, I'm going to look at the road and adjust my steering every 10 minutes versus I'm going to constantly watch the road and adjust my steering. How many times if you tried to do that top thing, just I'm locked in and every 10 minutes I'll readjust, you're going to run off the road. We want to be constantly adjusting when we're driving. And I would like to suggest that's what you need to be doing in software as well. Okay, next question for competing for the book. Don't forget. What is a key feature of a forecast? It gives you a single date. It's hard to understand. It tells you the weather, or the range adjusts as you acquire more evidence. 5 seconds remaining. And yes, the range adjusts as you acquire more evidence. Forecast can tell you the weather as well, but the range adjusts as you acquire more evidence. And that's a very important part of what makes forecasting valuable is it's no longer just that situation where, I'm going to come home for dinner. What time are you going to be there? And then like nothing can change in the entire world that you're expected to be home at dinner at that particular time. No, everything's adjusting. There's this constant communication going on between the developers that are doing things and the output that they're producing and the people that are actually have a say in what's the most important thing to work on next. So hidden work, the bane of accurate forecasts, right? I was at a conference one time. I was talking to some people, was presenting a conference. Somebody was talking about their project they were working on, and they said, "Yes, we've now done we've done the first 90%. So now we're starting on the next 90% of the work." Because oftentimes the last 10% takes 90% of the total time or something like that. And it's funny, but everyone has felt that pain before, right? And that's where the hidden work comes back to bite us. Because we'd like to imagine that our project looks like this, right? We just complete stuff, and keep on going. Forecasting only works, though, if the future looks something like the past. So what if I wait to take the first chapter text until I finish the whole stack? I finish the whole stack of books, and then I take the first chapter test, and then I find out I should have been taking notes. Or then I find out that I was taking way more notes than I actually need for this particular situation. So a question here, this gets a lot of feedback when you start talking about it in software, but if Katie finishes reading a book but hasn't taken any of the chapter tests, should we count it as progress? So yeah, I appreciate you guys are like, sticking up for my daughter. Yes, because she did the reading. She should get partial credit. But we've got the 40% here saying that because the test is what measures success or failure, we really don't know if we've made progress until we've actually done the thing that gets rid of the hidden work. And I would suggest that's probably what we want to be looking toward. So if a dev finishes a story, but SQA doesn't have time to test it within the sprint, should it count as completed for that sprint? see if you're as hard on the dev team as you were on my daughter here, or if there's. So 6% of us are saying yes because the dev part is done, but I would suggest that these other two answers may lead to better outcomes, or they should at least lead to situations where we have more predictability, because we're not counting something as progress until we actually know there's not hidden work with it anymore. And getting through SQA is probably a very major step in doing that. Getting to production would probably be even better. So this gives us, so if you imagine that you're in February and you look at this and you're asking yourself when you're going to be done, it gives you a very false sense of progress. But then once you get to March or April and it starts slowing down because now you're trying to deploy to production, or now you're trying to go through SQA, it makes it very, very hard to actually predict what you're doing. And the point I want to make with this is the forecasting works if we're actually doing all the work that we're expecting to be part of that forecast. If we just let the devs work and say, what user stories did you get done? And no user has looked at it, SQA hasn't taken a look at it, and none of those other things has happened. That's not going to accurately predict what's going to be happening in the future. So principles for forecasting. So we want to measure all the way through, no hidden work. We want to build the ability to change, often by investing in tests, because people may have different ideas of what they want to do. We don't want to build up a stack of cards that if we try to change one thing, the entire thing collapses. And we want to use the past to forecast similar things in the future. So don't expect 4 weeks when the development team is fully dedicated to predict how much you'll get done over Christmas break. So back to our principles for sizing work. Units used for comparison need to be similar in size. Sizes must be inexpensive to obtain, and it should be completed with no hidden work. So a forecast is a forecasted date range is feedback. It's different than an estimate where it's being used to say, this is when you shall be done. It's giving you feedback about what you've done so far, and a prediction for the future, a forecast for the future that basically says, if we continue to do what we've done in the past, this is when we think we'll be done. That's very, very different than taking a number, multiplying by 3 and saying, this is what we're going to try to do. Feedback will let your team adjust its behavior, to achieve an optimal outcome. And that's a very different role. Sorry about that. That's a very different role of what we're achieving there than what we're getting if we're focused on trying to just create a date that we say everything's going to hit. It's very interesting. Let me I must have put the wrong cable somewhere because this is a new problem that started happening. There we go. Okay, hopefully that stays. So principles for sizing work. Whoops, I went the wrong way. So here's a conversation. Does it look like we're going to be able to finish this story in time for QA to look at it before the end of the sprint? Developer says the scheduling part of this is more complex. They're working on something with scheduling more complex than we thought. Business says we want the scheduling part eventually, but if it works manually, we have everything we need for today. This actually comes from an conversation I had with working on a treasury project. And so the business then said, or the stakeholders said, then let's put the scheduling part into another ticket and prioritize it against everything else in the backlog. The business says, perfect, there's 100 other things in there that we want before that scheduling. In this particular case, we needed a scheduling part that would go in and say, here's all the holidays, all the federal holidays. And they wanted a nice UI on it so they could add those things. And that was something that they had expressed as being very, very important. But we had a conversation very similar to this, because we were looking and saying, hey, we don't like when this forecast says we're going to be getting done. What can we do? And they said, the scheduling, if we could just load the dates for the next 2 years for stuff, like load a CSV file or something, that gives us what we need. And we're willing to deprioritize this UI part in order to get other things that are more important to us. And the beauty of the forecasting in this case is it led to this conversation. If we just had an estimated date that was just like, this number times 3 and we're going to try to hit it, we wouldn't have been getting that rapid feedback. And when we made that change and took those stories out, we were able to see, oh, this looks like it's going to be something that we can get done sooner. And so the stakeholders and the users that we were building this for were actually getting positive feedback for lowering the scope. in the conversation with my wife, lizard food and those types of things, there was no positive feedback of, oh, we can get there sooner if we skip the lizard food. And if you're not having that type of feedback loop, it's very easy for the scope always to grow and never go down because there's not actual communication happening. Let's see. So these were a couple. Okay, so here's a couple examples. Let me see where I am on time. See if I want to go through any of these in more detail. So the holiday schedule for the treasury system, I mentioned scheduling system. I now remember this one. This was working for a genetics company, and they had asked us to build them a scheduling system for things. So I went in, spent like an hour mapping out everything that they had on the board, everything that they possibly wanted the scheduling system to do. And when we got through, I'm looking at the board, and I turned to the CEO and I said, you know, this looks very much like 90% of the stuff you've had me draw up here, you can do with Microsoft Exchange. And you have that today. And he turned to his chief operating operator and said, we've got Exchange? And the guy's like, yes, we have Exchange. I said, you can't do everything, but it does 90% of it. And when they heard that, they're like, okay, let's use the 90% that we have, and then we'll build the other stuff that we need. There's other things more important if we have a way to do this. And those types of conversations are very, very valuable because that's how you deliver business value as being the priority over just delivering more software. Another story from, this was working with the Federal Reserve Bank in Kansas City. They were working on their the portal site that all the internal people use for figuring out what's on the menu for the day and all the employee things and stuff like that. And this was before COVID hit, and they were kind of seeing we may want to have a way to put banners across the top of just important announcements. And the business analyst that put it together had a beautiful set of requirements. Like, we want 3 different levels of notifications, and if someone's seen one, then we want them to see the others before they see that one again. And it was very well written out. So I was working with the team that was actually doing the development on the CMS system, and they looked at it and said, yeah, we can probably do that. It's not huge, but we can probably deliver what he's wanting in six to 8 weeks and deliver it all. And so we sat down and we're having that conversation, and then I asked a simple question. I said, what if we just gave you a box, and when you type something in it, it shows up as alert at the top, and then when you don't want it, you just delete it. It's one thing. It's definitely not what you're asking for it, but it's a fraction of the development cost just to have a box without all this scheduling and things like that into it. And he said, man, if I could have that today, if I could have that right now, I would be able to use that today. And the developer said, well, we can have that for you by tomorrow afternoon. That's really, really simple. Now, from the business analyst standpoint, it wasn't something he had thought of, and it's not something he saw as being a huge difference. He didn't know how much this stuff would take. So the developers went and worked on it. Next day we came back, met with the business analyst, and I think, if I remember right, he had already found what they had put in and was using it before we even met to show it to him. And everybody in his department was all excited because it had taken so long to get changes done in the past, and they got this turned around right away, and it was noticeable. It was really, really valuable to a lot of people. And so we said, okay, do you want the scheduling next? And he was like, no. This gave us 95% of what we actually needed. Can we do this same magic on this other story? Can we find a way to get the 90% value out of this other story and get it turned around really fast? And while I was still working with them, I don't think they ever went back and did everything that was asked for. But my point here is that conversation about how long we think this will take and being able to forecast stuff can really drive a lot of huge efficiencies that don't happen if we're just basing things on estimate and there's no conversation happening. There's more value in creating conversations about priority than having a correct estimate, which you mentioned before. And a correct estimate that doesn't create conversation will end up being either wasteful or wrong. So their estimate of saying 6 to 8 weeks very likely was accurate. Well, we could assume that guess of how long it would take was, let's assume it was 100% accurate. Even if it was, it would have turned out being very, very wasteful, because when we had the conversation, we were able to find the 10% of the effort that delivered 90% of the value. But if we hadn't have had that conversation, if we had given an the estimate in a way that didn't have those conversations, we would have wasted a huge amount of money, things that they didn't necessarily need, but the way that it was being asked for kind of assumed it. So that conversation was the valuable part there. Okay, let's see here. Where are we? Okay. So I got 2 or 3 more questions here, and then we can have some discussion. I'm very interested to see what you guys think. So get ready. Here we go. So forecasts help teams get better at what? making people work faster, showing off our spreadsheet expertise, adjusting sequence of work to increase the chances of success, or providing even bigger buffers. Yes, adjusting the sequence of work to increase our chances of success. Very good. Okay, we got Karen, Chris, Maven, Valerie, and JT. Next question. In the example of the team deciding to defer the scheduling functionality, why were they able to make that decision? Was it because the Scrum Master took charge of things, because the developers know how to get things done, because business was collaborating with the team, or because they were wearing lucky slippers? And yes, it was because the business was collaborating with the team. Now, the developers did know how to get things done, but keep in mind the developer's ability to deliver exactly what was asked for would have taken a lot longer without delivering what the customer actually needed. And that's what came up when they were collaborating. Okay, last question. Get your clicking fingers ready. Got Karen, Chris, Maven, Valerie, and JT in the top spots. And last question is, what happens if we try removing testing from the definition of done? We will create more hidden work, the developers will work faster, we can use shorter sprints, or the delivery date will be sooner. What happens when we remove testing? Remember, testing is one of the things we were saying tells us that there's not hidden work. Oh, I gave it away. Okay, but everybody got it anyway. All right, we'll create a lot of hidden work because without testing, it's very easy to get to the point where we deliver something, think it's done, but haven't actually proven it's done. Okay, and the winner here is Karen. Very good. So Karen, I will type my email address in here, and anyone else is free to reach out as well. But send me your email or your mailing address, and I will get a copy of a book headed to you hopefully tomorrow. So let's see, where are we at on time? Okay. So I really wanted to do something and I cut it short. Give me just a second here. I'm going to show you one last thing that I didn't know if I could fit in because I have to change the audio for it, but I think I've got just enough time to do it here. Find it for you. This is good because I really wanted you to see this. Okay, I'm going to change my audio so it's coming from, whoops. Okay, so this is an example of estimating on, let's say, the Starship Enterprise. And the thing I want you to think about is whether or not your estimates may look something like this. This is from Studio C, and I think it really rings true to what we often do. And as soon as I start it, let me know if you're seeing, if you're.
Captain, shields are at 40%. We can't hold them off much longer.
New guy, where are we with bringing the navigation core back online?
McGrath, Captain, and it's real busted up. It's gonna take at least 2 hours to fix.
I need you to do it in one. Duncan, see if you can reroute power from life support into the main shield.
Captain. Captain.
What is it, McGrath?
Sorry, I said it would take 2 hours to fix, like at least, as in minimum.
And yet you only have one. Get to it, McGrath!
Well, I have a doctorate in navigation core patching from Space Harvard. Like, it takes 2 hours to fix.
Captain, the torpedoes have malfunctioned. We must unblock the ports before we can fire again.
How long will that take?
About 6 hours, Captain.
Do it in 3.
Consider it done.
How can you do your job that fast?
Oh, unblocking the ports takes 2 hours tops.
But you said 6.
Oh, yes, I said 6 because I knew he would say 3, and I wanted a spare hour for my crosswords.
We gotta run! McGrath, your 1 hour is ticking.
Captain, I need more time.
McGrath, every single one of my crew can cut a task time in half. Chef Dron, where's my 2-minute rice?
That'll be 15 minutes, Captain.
Do it in 7.5.
You got it, sir.
This seems really inefficient. Just go with it.
We can't take much more of this. McGrath, core update, now!
Okay, here's your update. The navigation core will now take 4 hours to fix.
Do it in 2.
Okay, and I need 10 men to help me.
I'll give you 5 men to help you.
Aw, darn. Oh, I guess I can make that work. And After this battle is done, we need a party for twice as many people who are on the crew.
I'll give you a party for the exact amount of people on this crew.
Man, I guess that makes sense. And we also want a 40-hour work week.
I'll give you a 20-hour work week and not an hour more.
Oh, shoot, you're really tough.
Captain, we have an incoming transmission from the alien ship.
Patch us through.
We have you at our beams. You have 10 minutes to surrender or be destroyed.
We'll surrender in 5.
No, it will take us 1,000,000 years to surrender.
You have 500,000 years to surrender. And not a year more.
Neil,
McGrath, how did you know that would work?
let's just say I learned from the best, Captain.
3 cheers for McGrath.
No, 1.5 cheers for McGrath.
Back to work.
Okay, so if you're doing estimates like that, it might make sense to kind of rethink things. Maybe some of the things we talked about today will give you some ideas of how to get estimates that aren't quite done in that way. If you enjoyed this talk, I do Agile Lunch and Learns, Bob mentioned. If you go to this link right here, it will give you a place you can type in, or go to Agile Lunch and Learn and click on it. You can type in to get a copy of my book if you want a digital copy of it. It also will put you on the mailing list for the weekly talks we have. This came from one of those talks, or was originally developed there. We get a lot of guest speakers and stuff in. So anyway, if that's interesting, love to have you take advantage of that. Any questions, any thoughts, questions on what we were saying? And it's fine. There are disagreements. Does any of this sound like it's just crazy talk?
I thought it was really interesting. I really liked the approach and how you didn't even touch story points, which is a very popular thing with Agile teams. So, and the way you approached it made it interesting. And that video at the end definitely kind of sent that message. Thank you.
What do you think about, like, kind of what I'm suggesting, the idea of forecasting? How does that feel compared to what you're doing? And some of you may be doing stuff like this already.
Feel free to turn on your microphones and provide your answers to Mark that way, if you prefer.
And maybe you could take Mark off the spotlight now, John.
Sure. Well, I want everybody to just give them another couple of seconds to get all the information.
So I put the link that will take you to in the chat. If you go to that, it will give you a box that you can type in your name and get a copy of my book and get on the list. That'll get you on everything. So if you want to use that, that's great.
Okay. You're off of the spotlight.
Awesome. Any thoughts? Questions?
Forecasting, this is Sunil here. I think forecasting is certainly more practical approach. And considering that the estimates are anyway wrong about 50% of the time and probably more, forecasting gives us a better tool to predict at least the immediate future and continue correcting the course on the way of our development journey.
And if anyone's interested in looking at those spreadsheets more detail, just let me know. You can email me, or I can send it to you, Bob, and you send it out to everybody. But I can give you those so you can play around with it if that's of interest.
That'd be great. Thank you.
I thought the part was great about not spending so much time up front coming up with an estimate that it really detracts from the team beginning to do the work. So that's, you always have to think of that, and that's a good point. That happens all the time. I think it's a valuable point.
I think it's especially helpful if you start thinking about the fact that if you're spending a lot of time doing evidence that's keeping the team from starting working, you're actually deferring the point that you're starting to acquire actual evidence of what you can do. And so it doesn't take very long before it's like we're guessing better, but we're putting off the point that we'll actually find out, is it even possible? What if nobody on the team likes working together and they just can't stand each other and you don't know that till they try to work on something? Well, that'd be good to find out right away. I mean, hopefully that's not the case for anyone, but could be.
Well, it's like with Agile framework, you have the team velocity concept where you use a story points estimate, how many points the team can actually accomplish during let's say a 2-week sprint. But then you go ahead and you do a retrospective on that. Will they over or under? If they're over ambitious and they're estimating 50 points a sprint, but they commit to 50, but they only complete, let's say, 40, then that's all part of the feedback system. So the next sprint, they'll maybe estimate team velocity at 40 points. So they're always adjusting that. So that's also part of the forecast mechanism.
But my experience with story points is they can often obscure more stuff than they help with. And I mean, if you find a team that's really getting a lot of value out of it, that's great. I think it's possible for that to happen. But in most cases, what I found is it makes us not thinking so much. It moves us from thinking about what we're actually delivering of value and introduces a layer of indirection that sometimes makes it harder to figure out exactly what string pulled caused what result. And that's why I usually, if you can get your stories small, I'd rather put my effort into making my stories smaller, something that the customer can actually experience, than putting it into story pointing. If you're getting good results, though, that's great. But sometimes that's one of the things that it's easy to hide stuff that's making it harder to know when you're going to finish stuff. But okay, well, I was told we stop at 7 p.m. sharp, and I think we're there. So I'll turn it back over to whoever, whatever you guys do next.
Okay. All right. And again, on behalf of PMI New Jersey chapter, thank you, Mark, for this presentation and giving your time to us tonight. We really appreciate it. Thank you.